Now, Tommy and Flo's relationship began as her time with Motown was coming to an end. The day after her birthday in 1967, after they threw her this birthday party literally the night before, Flo was kicked out of the Supremes, but that didn't matter to Tommy though. He didn't see her as a Supreme, he just saw her as Flo. Tommy proposed to Flo through the phone when he was in San Juan. She said yes, and he quit his job with Motown. They went on and eloped in Hawaii. Now, despite the uncertainty of her career, she let her husband be her business manager as she sought to go solo. Florence got a deal at ABC Records after she signed her Motown Settlement, where she agreed to $160,000 as long as she never mentioned that she was ever a Supreme. After she put out a record, but the label didn't promote it well, it was glaringly obvious that she shouldn't have given this job to her husband. Due to the lack of success with her record, she was dropped from the label. So around that time, she was expecting twins, and realizing she never received her signing bonus, which was supposed to be $15,000, nor did she receive her Motown settlement, she reached out to her attorney. Now, her attorney was this guy, Leonard Bond, who basically yada yada this. So because Florence never saw her money, nor would he hand over her contracts and paperwork from her time at Motown, they felt like he was playing with their money. She would sue him. She struggled to find a lawyer to take the case, but eventually found counsel at a black law firm. So the stress of this put a strain on her marriage, but also Tommy's career did too. That black law firm that represented her found Tommy a job at this startup record label, Invictus. Now, Flo was upset that he took that job because they were paying him $180 every other week versus this grocery store he was working at paid him $200 every week. Needless to say, all of this was chaotic, but she continued to find some passion within her marriage to Tommy as they had twins, Michelle Denise and Nicole Renee in the late 1960s, and then a third daughter, Lisa Sabrina, on July 15th, 1972. But it didn't matter because eventually they separated and Flo would file for divorce. Eventually they would get back together. Now, throughout this time, Flo was suffering from depression. It got to a point where she wasn't able to pay the mortgage and had to pawn jewelry, but still ended up losing her house. And Tommy had gotten laid off at Invictus, so the only thing he could do was help out with food from time to time. Now, after the foreclosure, Flo and her 3 daughters moved in with her sister and her 5 kids. Flo and Tommy decided, you know what, let's try to get back together, but because of their respective living situations, they couldn't live in one home. Now, she would turn to drinking even heavier than before. Now, when she was in the Supremes and was drinking, many felt like she was coping with the physical and emotional trauma from what happened to her when she was a teenager. She went to a sock hop with her brother, but actually kind of lost him in the crowd. A guy she knew growing up, this guy named Reggie Harding, that was like this popular basketball player in the area, was like, hey, I'll take you home. But instead, he pulled over into an alley and ape-raped her. Now, this assault took her virginity. So that plus the fact that he then went on to have a career with the Pistons, probably just a lot of trauma for a teenage girl. So then fast forward to that on top of losing her job, going broke, ending her marriage, losing her home, and just being at the very bottom. It's just like, whew, that's just so much. After Tommy stopped paying child support, she got on welfare. The Detroit Free Press ran an article about her, which did bring her some national attention briefly because a lot of people had no idea what was going on with Florence. They thought that she was doing fine, she was living off her millions, but no, that wasn't the reality. And Mary had even reached out because Mary was always reaching out and checking on her and the girls and offered her a job at Motown again, and she refused because at that point she hated Motown. Now, she eventually started reading the Bible again, and then that gave her some solace, and it seemed like things were starting to finally turn around for her. Her ex-lawyer called to settle. She received $82,000 and was able to keep $62,000. It at least allowed her to be able to get a place for her, Tommy, and the kids. In winter 1976, Flo was found on the floor of her home and unable to move. He took her to the hospital where they discovered she had a blood clot in her artery. Now, the doctors were hopeful, but sadly, on February 22nd, 1976, Florence Ballard passed away at the age of 32 due to coronary artery thrombosis. Tommy planned her funeral, which was performed by Reverend C.L. Franklin, aka Aretha's daddy. Thousands of people showed up despite them changing the details of the funeral at the last minute. Now, years later, Tommy would pass away in his sleep due to a heart attack.